Welcome to the iPad Possibilities Podcast, episode number 4, iPad Alone, Part 1. This podcast is supported by the iPad Possibilities Podcast app, found in the iTunes App Store for $2.99. With the app, you'll gain early access to the shows and some extra bonus content not available in the regular podcast. Get it today for $2.99. Well, welcome, and this is the iPad Possibilities Podcast. I'm Tim, and I'm your host of this show, and this week I bring you the first half of an interview I did with Anthony Moody. Anthony Moody recently started a blog called iPad Alone at iPadalone.com. And what he will be doing is once the iPad comes out, he will be not using and getting rid of his Kindle and MacBook Pro and switching over solely to the iPad as his computing device and just using his iMac to sync over media as its only use. So in this first half of the interview, we simply discuss his current setup and how they work into his workflow for his job, and how the iPad will be able to replace all of his needs for computing, and why he did choose the iPad as something that, hey, this can replace what I use for my current setup, my current workflow, why this is such an amazing device, and we'll get into more nitty-gritty on why the iPad is such a revolutionary device and why, for so many people, it can replace your computer as your sole computing device. So without further delay, here is the first half of the interview with Anthony Moody. Enjoy. Today I'm here with Anthony Moody of iPad Alone and Indalo Productions, and we're talking about why he's chosen to go solely with the iPad as his computing device. So first off, what do you do for a living?
Well, I'm a feature film producer. And what that basically means is that, my responsibilities to my work for myself, and what I have to do is source material, which is, mostly consists of scripts, occasionally a novel or an idea that I have turned into a script. And I have to get that script to a point where its quality is able to attract money and the kind of talent that can bring it to life. And then see it through to completion and get the film out in the marketplace in the best way available. So I've done 5 films so far, and this is after a medium-length career on Wall Street. I was on the street for about 8 years. Then I went and joined an internet startup called Register.com, where I was for about 3-4 years, during which time I got my MBA here in New York at the Stern School of Business, which, of course, NYU also has a quite famous and excellent film school. And they sort of team teach a lot of courses that cross over from, the creative side of the business to the business side of the business, entertainment finance courses and things like that. So I began to do that, began to sort of focus my coursework in that area, and it just sort of drew me in, and the rest is hopefully history in the making.
Yeah. And what do you currently use for your tech setup as far as computers and other devices?
Right. My primary computer, and by primary I mean 99% of the time, is a MacBook Pro. It's a 15-inch model, and it's about it's about 3.5 years old at this point. So I have long been a kind of a gadget guy, and I always have upgrade-itis. So I've been looking for something to upgrade from or trade to from my MacBook Pro, probably for about the last year and a half. And frankly, of course, are the newer models nicer and more powerful and faster and sleeker and so on, and with better build quality? Yes. But on the whole, they've felt, even with the transition to the sort of the aluminum unibody design, they mostly seem like incremental changes rather than sort of wholesale changes. So that's why I've been kind of sitting on this MacBook Pro for 3.5 years. I also have a Kindle 2 actually, which I use primarily to read scripts. I had been doing a lot of reading on my MacBook Pro screen, and for me, it wasn't so much an eye strain issue, which is something that's often cited as being problematic. For me, the issue was, I can't help but also have a web browser and an email client open.
Yeah, distractions.
Yeah, too many distractions. And to give a script its due, you really have to sort of sit with it and let it happen without distraction while you're reading. And the MacBook Pro is just not well suited to that, or let me say, I'm not well suited to that. It's impossible for me to not have those other applications going. So the Kindle 2 was a really nice sort of compromise. It sort of doesn't do anything else.
Right.
and it does a decent job of presenting the PDFs that most of the scripts float around as. And I hate printing the paper out just because even if you do two-sided printing, two pages per side, you're still talking 25, 30 pieces of paper per script.
Right.
And, if I'm reading 2-3 scripts a day, sometimes, on a weekend, I may blow through 5 or 10, to print those all out is just it just kind of rankles, not to mention just the physical logistics of always having, tons of paper and recycling and all that kind of stuff. So the Kindle's a great thing. And then, of course, I say, of course, an iPhone. I have the 3GS, which sort of never leaves my person.
Right. Yeah.
So, it's interesting. I've been increasingly finding that the iPhone is so capable that when I travel, I live in New York, but I go to Los Angeles quite frequently. And recently I've been preparing to shoot a film somewhere in Central or South America. So I've been traveling in that region for quite a bit. And also go to Europe quite often. So what I've been finding is that more and more I'm leaving my MacBook Pro at home because the iPhone is so capable. And really the thing that I find most lacking about it as far as a day-to-day use are just those times when I think, I'd like to have a little bit more screen to surf the web or be a little bit more productive. And, toward that end, I actually bought a Dell Mini 9, which I hacked to, Hackintosh style with OS X. And, I really did it up. I put in a 64 gig run core SSD, 2 gigs of RAM. I mean, I more or less tricked it out as much as you can. And it fairly capably runs the software, but what I've found is that, the itty bitty keyboard, what I found is that OS X doesn't scale down to a screen that size so well. And my hope is that, conversely, my supposition is that the iPhone OS will scale up to a larger screen a lot better than OS X scales down to a smaller screen. So that's sort of my current setup. And, I've transitioned in terms of reading scripts. I've transitioned to reading them on my Kindle almost exclusively. I almost never read them on my laptop anymore. I never even tried to read them on the Mini. I mean, the screen is, it's not a screen size issue. It's just a screen quality issue. It's simply not that nice a screen. So it's a nice little toy, and look, at 2.2 pounds, for those times when I feel like I need to be a little bit more productive than what the iPhone can grant me, it's a nice substitute for my MacBook. So I don't, it's 3+ pounds, probably 4 pounds all in terms of once you get the AC adapter and so on. Sure. It's a lot lighter and a lot smaller and a lot less sort of clumsy and delicate to carry around. So that's my sort of my current setup.
Do you have to take notes on the scripts as you're reading them? How does that work with the Kindle?
Yeah, it's interesting. Usually I only do that for scripts that I ultimately like. Okay. So, and I never do it the first time through a script. So the first time through, I read it like I'd read a novel, not like I'd read a textbook. And if I like a script enough that I think, this is a project I want to get involved in, then I'll physically print it out and handwrite notation if and as needed. I have done something kind of as an intermediate, which is my Kindle case is sort of a folio type case, and on the opposite side, I have it's a perfectly sized spot for one of those sort of 5x7 pads. So in a pinch, if I'm reading something on the Kindle and I want to physically write a note, I'll do that. The Kindle keyboard is a disaster, and more than that, just the whole process of making a note is sort of a disaster. It's just not a well thought, in my opinion, not a well thought out process. Going back and reviewing those notes, it's just not a friendly process. So it happens to dovetail nicely with the way I do things, which is, as I said, I don't really mark up scripts when I read them the first time. And by the way, as a percentage, the number of scripts I print out compared to what I read is maybe 1%, maybe. So it's not often. I mean, as a producer, you only have sort of so much bandwidth in terms of the number of projects you can really push in active development. So, for something to rise to the level of getting onto that plate, it has to be pretty good, or you have to see that it can get to be pretty good. And so it doesn't happen often. So the good news for the Kindle in my usage is I don't have a lot of use or need to write notes on the scripts. But, look, if and when there's a PDF type reader where I can make notes right on the page, I anticipate that that's something I would embrace.
Yeah. Do you use the Kindle for ebook reading at all, or is it just pure business type of work?
I do, and I didn't think that I would, or I didn't anticipate that I would. And the other interesting thing about it is not only do I read a lot more than I used to, both scripts and novels, and nonfiction also. And what I've really come to love is the ability to download a free sample of a book before buying it. You're buying a hardcover from an Amazon or wherever, 15, 20, 25 bucks, sometimes $30 for a nice hardcover book that you hope ultimately you can only hope that it's good, right?
Right.
And I've gotten 10, 50, 100 pages into a lot of novels and just felt like, God, I just can't stand this thing. And you put it down and then you're done. The free samples, they can be quite a bit, 5%, 10% of a book sometimes. You can really get a sense for whether or not you're going to want to finish the book.
Sure.
And boom, when I do, I buy it and plow through the rest happily. So it's actually increased my reading. The fact that it weighs, I don't know offhand, but I'm going to guess half a pound more or less. Just makes it a little easier to obviously, than toting around a 400-page hardcover novel.
Right.
To say nothing of 10 of those or 10 scripts, which is a sort of image is the leaving the office with a briefcase or backpack packed full of scripts you're taking home for the weekend. Those days are long, long, long behind me.
Yeah. Do you see yourself getting stuck in the Kindle ecosystem? Like when the iPad comes out, do you see yourself continuing to buy books in the Kindle because that's where your current collection's at? Or
no, I have not bought. Well, first of all, let me sort of step back. I appreciate a sort of a bookshelf, a physical bookshelf full of books, in a wonderful library or living room type setting. But on the other hand, that's to me mostly a sort of an aesthetic pleasure, and I've in embracing the reading on the Kindle, I've sort of moved past that. The books sitting on the Kindle don't give me a lot of pleasure. I don't tend to reread novels. Occasionally I will, but it's the exception, not the rule. And any reference book that I really feel like I'll want to go back to, I'll go buy a physical copy. I mean, I have a couple of reference books that I use quite often. And by the way, that's sort of how I am with my physical media now. I mean, I had a fairly large DVD collection. And now, I use Netflix almost exclusively, and I'll only buy Blu-rays for my very, very, very favorite movies. The rest I'll just rent from Netflix.
Sure.
or stream from some other sort of equivalent source. So so no, I don't feel like I'm going to be trapped in the Amazon ecosystem, and at the very least, the good news is we know there's a Kindle, at least for now. there's a Kindle app for the iPhone, so it'll be presumably there on the iPad as well. And at the very least, I'll be able to access my books, my existing library, even if Apple and Amazon don't play nice and allow their books to open in each other's readers, which I wouldn't anticipate. So I'm not. It doesn't overly concern me.
Okay. Outside of work and everything, do you use your MacBook Pro for anything else?
Skype calls, particularly when I'm traveling. It's nice to see, particularly I have a family, so it's nice to see them while I travel and let them see me. Beyond that, it's pretty much, I mean, obviously I have I do my online banking and, obviously personal emails and things like that.
Sure.
Household finance spreadsheets and things like that. But, on the whole, outside of business, the answer is not really. Not really.
Okay. Are you going to end up selling?
Actually, sorry. Let me make one sort of amendment to that, in addition to what is my current setup thing. We do have and have had for a couple 3 years now. I know there are ways to sort of sync libraries and things like that, but what we found is that the easiest way to kind of manage our household media, and I include photos and music and movies in that, is to have them all live on one central computer. So we have an iMac that's dedicated for that purpose. It's not a computer that's quote unquote used as a computer. It's both a sort of a household server. It pushes music out to our music system in our house. We stream stuff to Apple TV for one of our TVs, and also it's where we sync our iPhones on the media side, and as far as the personal data side. I use MobileMe and my wife uses her laptop. What a lot of people don't know is that you actually can sync an iPhone to two computers if you split the syncing into sort of media and data, personal information. A lot of people don't realize that. So anyway, so we sync our media all in one place. So we'll continue to have the iMac sort of no matter what. We spend a lot of time ripping our existing collection of stuff. We buy, to the extent we buy stuff, we buy it almost exclusively digitally. So there's not a lot of ripping to be done. And I have a pretty hopefully bulletproof RAID.
Yeah.
Backing it all up, and every once in a while I'll do a clone and put a drive in at least another room in the house. So, in case. But so I'll continue to have that, and that won't go away. But when I get the iPad, I'm definitely selling the Hackintosh. In fact, I had kind of already decided to sell the Hackintosh anyway. It was sort of a fun little project, but ultimately not something that I was ever going to be my primary machine.
Yeah.
Nor is it a very satisfying secondary machine. And then once I'm not going to put my MacBook Pro on eBay on the day my iPad arrives. I mean,
Sure.
I paid a transition period, but I'm going to make it as short as humanly possible. I'm going to try to go cold turkey, and but there is going to be there's a lot we don't know about the iPad, right? Like how if at all the file system is going to work, and how apps are going to access those files, and so on. More and more information is trickling out about that, but I'm going to have to figure stuff out, right? Among them, my files and my key files. How am I going to get them on? And so on. So ultimately, though, I do envision my MacBook Pro hitting eBay, just because hey, at £1.50, the iPad is for me, it's pretty compelling.
Sure. Do you think the Kindle will go on eBay as well, or do you see hanging on to that so you have an e-ink display if you want to read stuff on there too?
Yeah, it's a good question. I feel like I certainly won't instantly go on eBay. In all likelihood, it will, because as I said, when to the extent I've read on my MacBook Pro, it's not like I think, gee, this is a not so great experience. It strains my eyes. So, but that said, I've not read on the iPad, so I can't say how that's going to feel. Now, apparently, the screen on it is a higher quality than that on my current laptop. And Apple's obviously designed what appears to be a beautiful ebook reader for it. And I would anticipate that, between the subtle things they've done, like making the page color not a pure white, but a sort of linen-y off-white with almost a subtle texture. You change the fonts and the font size as you can on the Kindle, and obviously adjust the backlight. I have a feeling that it's going to become my primary reading device. So, if I do think the Kindle is going to hit the for sale bin, but I don't think it's going to happen on day one. I'll try out the iPad and see how it goes. I mean, if I find myself going back to the Kindle, I think that'll say a lot, but I don't anticipate that happening, to be honest.
Okay. What about the iPad when you first saw it revealed made you just jump out and say, I want to go all in and kind of use this as my main device and simplify what I've been doing?
Well, a handful of things. First and foremost, just the form factor. A screen that is of sufficiently usable size in an extremely light device. What I've come to discover in going from toting the MacBook Pro at 5.5 pounds and probably pushing 6 by the time you throw in the AC adapter and an Ethernet cable, to toting the Hackintosh at 2.2 pounds plus another, I don't know, quarter pound or less for a couple ounces for the little AC adapter, is that at the margin, those weight differences add up to make a huge difference. I mean, a huge difference, almost inconceivably so, which is why, by the way, I didn't bite on the MacBook Air, which felt like, the closest we were going to come there for a while.
Sure.
It's materially lighter than the MacBook Pro, but ultimately it's just another laptop. And, I kind of wanted to, and it's a funny thing too, after carrying around a 2-pound thing, I didn't want to go up to a 3-pound thing,
Yeah.
and it's hard. I mean, once you shed the weight, it's really hard to pick up that bag when it's loaded down at 8, 9, 10 pounds full of stuff. So all of a sudden, wow, here's this thing you could hold in one hand, 1.5 pounds, while still giving you, as I said, a usable screen size. The other thing is that, as I said, I've come to rely a lot more on my iPhone, and I find it to be an incredibly, incredibly capable device. And so, a lot of people have sort of derisively referred to the iPad as, just a big iPhone or just a big, or more accurately, just a big iPod Touch. And, to me, the extent to which it is a larger iPod Touch is genius and brilliant, as opposed to a limitation. So I don't say that in a negative way. To me, that's a great thing, right? We have this device that with a 3.5-inch screen is already incredibly capable and powerful. Does it have shortcomings? Of course. For my use, most of those shortcomings are related to its size as opposed to a feature set. So when people talk about, well, it doesn't multitask, and well, the iPad doesn't have a camera, which, by the way, is something I'm going to miss for Skype calls. Although my guess is that whether it's Rev B or somehow they maybe even sneak it in for Rev A, I do think we'll see it in an iPad, or it'll be an accessory. And either way.
Yeah.
Either way, yeah. If it's an accessory, I'll buy it. If it's in a future version, I'll swap to that one. But other than that, I mean, to me, the shortcomings of the iPhone as a computer relate to its size, not to its existing software capabilities.
Yeah, on day one when I got the iPhone, I was imagining, if they made a bigger version of this, that would be just incredible.
Right, and
finally coming.
Exactly. It's finally coming, and it sort of feels like, as I said, having used the iPhone and relied on it for so long. I mean, I had the original one. I skipped the 3G and I went from the original to the 3GS. And, it's become, I mean, it's completely indispensable to me. So I'm so familiar with it. Plus, we have this incredible wealth of applications that are going to run on the iPad from day one. And look, will the iPad sell in the same numbers as the iPhone and iPod Touch? Certainly not out of the gate. Although I do think it's going to be very successful, as in selling in the millions of devices over the course of, say, the first year. And I think that's going to be more than enough demand to spur developers to really get out of the box and come up with some great, great applications that are much more full-featured, much more capable, both because of the screen real estate and because of what I think we are going to see inevitably in the future versions of the iPhone OS. I mean, people talk a lot about multitasking. Are we going to get multitasking as we think of it in OS X right now, i.e., you can open as many applications as you want, as many windows as you want, size them in any way you want. I mean, basically, as much as your heart desires until your hardware just completely bogs down. Are we going to get that? I would anticipate no, because that opens the door to a poor user experience. I mentioned the hardware getting bogged down. I've used a Palm Pre, not extensively, but I borrowed a friend's for an afternoon to sort of play with. And granted, the newer version, the Plus, I guess it is a little more robust and does better in this regard. But at the end of the day, you can still open up so many applications that the thing grinds to a crawl, and that's just not the kind of experience that I believe Apple is interested in foisting on its customers, its users, for the iPad. It's certainly not for the iPhone. I mean, look, the last rev of the iPhone was basically all about it speeding up and becoming more robust. In my address book, for instance, I have about 2,500 entries. On the original iPhone, it was painful to use. It was slow to load. It was slow to get to the point where you could scroll. It was slow to scroll. It was choppy. It was really just awful. And it totally flies on the 3GS. So, I think the experience is where the focus is for Apple. So that said, are we going to get multitasking, quote unquote? I believe yes. But I think it'll be presented in a way that solves sort of the problems that we face for most people most of the time. So combinations of 2, 3, 4 applications at once that kind of makes sense as a little ecosystem to have open and running at a time. Look, I could be wrong. Obviously, this is just absolutely my speculation. I just don't see Apple kind of opening the gates completely so that you can sort of have as many apps running at a time. I mean, unless the hardware in the iPad is way more capable even than we've been led to believe.
Yeah, and I think any more than 4 apps at a time, I mean, it's unnecessary.
It's sort of unnecessary. Exactly. I mean,
I can see Skype running in the background, Pandora,
yep.
And then whatever app you're using in the front ground. So even 3 would be appropriate even.
Yeah, I mean, the things I always have running on my desktop are my email program, my web browser, my calendar, and my address book. So that's 4, and I have them going all the time. Skype would occasionally be a 5th. Now, things like the address book and the calendar, do you need to have those running all the time? I mean, for my money, no. Can you envision scenarios where you'd want 5 or 6? Sure, but. And so maybe 6 is the limit, fine. The other interesting thing about the iPad is that you can easily envision ways where where applications could be presented side by side. I mean, in landscape, having 2 applications splitting the screen is sort of an obvious thing that could be done. In portrait mode, having 4 applications sharing the screen in a 2x2 grid is something that's easy to sort of envision. And how you invoke that state, how you exit it, how you swap applications in and out of it, remains to be seen. But I think, like cut and paste, look, it took longer than a lot of people would have liked to arrive. But on the other hand, the implementation, such as it is, for my money, I can't imagine it being any other way. And I think it's sufficiently simple and elegant and usable that it just works. And I think that that's the kind of multitasking we're going to get in the iPad. So, and we're already seeing hints of that, for those brave enough to kind of leak stuff out of the NDA for the OS 3.2 SDK. We're getting some interesting hints of things to come, and I think that's just the beginning. I mean, and I don't take as bluster, the reports of from the town hall meeting that Steve Jobs held at Apple, just after the iPad introduction, wherein he apparently said something along the lines that the next iPhone release was going to be an A+ update. To me, that speaks to both hardware and software. And when he says, it's going to be another leap forward that the rest of the market is going to not be able to keep up with, I tend to believe him. I mean, sure, he's prone to hyperbole, to mildly, but I believe him. I mean, I think the iPhone currently provides the best overall user experience. Does it have from a spec sheet checkbox standpoint, is it on the top of the heap? No. There are Android phones that are, have with the 5 megapixel cameras and things like that, and like the Pre with its multitasking, it's card-based multi. But I mean, on a day-to-day usage basis, you can pry my iPhone from my cold dead hands, and so I think we're already ahead. And this hardware is almost a year old at this point, So I think we're about to see another major leap. I think the announcement of the next major OS comes next month in March, which is more or less what we've seen in the past.
Yeah.
New hardware ships in June for the iPhone. And look, whether it's in the form of 3.2 or 4.0 or both, with 3.2 as a kind of stepping stone toward 4.0, obviously remains to be seen. But I think we're due for super exciting stuff, and all I see is possibility and opportunity for the iPad. I think Apple will have been shown to have chosen extremely wisely in developing iWorks and taking so long to demonstrate that at the keynote, because I think that really, in a fairly pointed way, highlights the difference between an iPhone or an iPod Touch and an iPad. And it's one of those things that, frankly, it just makes me shake my head when people call it just a big iPod Touch. If you've ever tried to actually create a spreadsheet or a document on an iPhone, is it physically possible? Sure. Or to manipulate such a document? Sure, right? There are applications that let you do that. But it's simply no fun.
Yeah, it's painful. I've tried it.
It's painful. It's painful. And so I think by showing right on day one that there's going to be a way to be productive, to create content and not just consume content on the thing, that therein for me lies the greatest difference, between the smaller devices and the iPad. And I think devs are chomping at the bit at this point to release applications as opposed to apps. To sort of make a distinction, much more capable, much more full featured, and because of the touch or multi-touch possibilities, a lot more interesting. And I think paradigms are going to shift, and I think this is where it's going. Look, when the mouse came, when the mouse and Windows sort of paradigm appeared, it was pretty obvious to a lot of people that it was the future. And it was only a matter of time before that, that's what all users and all devices were going to be doing. I think smartphones have shown us the way. Is the iPad going to be perfect out of the box? No. But I think, what I foresee is Apple continuing to kind of embed multi-touch into its full-fledged OS X. First as they've done already on the touchpads, right? Now we have 3-finger gestures and 4-finger gestures, and I think that's going to also be brought to the screen. I think that's obviously the next sort of frontier for OS X. And I think what's going to happen is that these things are going to converge. I mean, I don't think it's a mistake or a coincidence that, OS X is what underlies the iPhone's operating system. The iPads are going to become more and more capable, and OS X, as we think of it today, is going to become more and more like the experience of an iPhone or an iPad. And I think ultimately, I mean, look, will we always have hard keyboards? Probably. But if you told me that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, keyboards were a thing of the past, whether because of touch or because of voice recognition or whatever, or, the ability to read hand gestures in 3D space, I would believe you. But on the other hand, I think it's going to happen sooner than expected that screen-only devices are going to eat up the lion's share of the portable computing market. I mean, people may always need workstations for super heavy duty, high def video editing and things like that. But for what most people do, and again, this is where I think the iPad again is genius. It's for most of the people most of the time, right? I mean, as I've said, I'm going to have to, at least for now, hold on to my iMac to serve, because I have a terabyte of media. Well, terabyte of media doesn't fit on my iPad, right?
Yeah.
Until I can hook up a hard drive to my iPad, or until all that media can live in the cloud and I can sync wirelessly and all that kind of stuff. I have to kind of straddle both worlds to a degree, but I'm gonna, but I see nothing but possibility, and I'm really excited for it, and I'm up for the challenge. I don't pretend that there aren't going to be times when I think, gee, be nice to have a keyboard right now, or a mouse, or just a regular touchpad with a button. But I'm excited for what both Apple and clever developers come up with to kind of get beyond the box we've been in now for a long, long time.
What kind of accessories do you see yourself getting on day one? Are you going to grab the keyboard dock or?
Yeah, I think I'm going to get just the regular dock and a separate Bluetooth keyboard, and that'll be my kind of on the desk in my office setup. That's where that stuff will live. I've not held the Bluetooth keyboard, so I don't know sort of how heavy it is and if they make a little slipcase for it. So I, in general, I wouldn't anticipate toting it around. I mean, maybe if I were going on a business trip for, more than a week, I could envision maybe taking it with me, throwing it in my regular suitcase as opposed to my carry-on. But generally speaking, I'm thinking regular dock, Bluetooth keyboard. I don't see myself as a sort of a slipcase guy. I may get one of those the clear sort of stick-on protectors for the back, just so it doesn't get scratched up.
Yeah.
I may play with one for the screen. I actually prefer the feel of the iPhone screen unprotected as opposed. I've tried a number of the films, and I just don't like the way they feel as much as the screen. And look, does it get fingerprints and smudge and whatever? Yeah. Is it that much of a hardship to wipe it off? No. So I'll experiment with that. And then the other nice thing is that I'm going to get a smaller bag. I have right now for my MacBook Pro, I have a bag that probably weighs, I don't know, I've never weighed it empty, but I mean, it probably weighs 4 pounds empty, I've been poking around. There are bags being announced left and right for the iPad that weigh 3/4 pounds. And what I find with bags is that the bigger they are, the more stuff you put in them. And then, of course, the more stuff you put in them, the heavier they are. So I think by intentionally limiting myself to a smaller bag that's lighter, my overall toting weight is going to be way down. I'm going to if I can get my bag fully loaded, to top out at 3 pounds, which I think is possible with the iPad, and one of the bags that I have my eye on. To me, that's like a game changer, because what that means is I will never leave it home because I'm like, I don't want to carry it. You know what I
Right.
mean? Which happens with my laptop a lot.
I actually ordered a Scotty vest jacket, and it should be here today, which I plan on using instead of actual luggage or whatever.
Yeah, it's an interesting possibility, right? Because you just sort of take it off, put it on the belt, at the airport, and send the whole thing through with all your gadgets. Yeah, I have to sort of think about that and look into it, and I think that'll be for me a learning experience. How I carry it around and how often I feel a need to take it out, because obviously I think a Scotty vest it's a lot more convenient to just sort of pull it out for a quick look. So it'll be interesting to see how much I kind of find myself wanting to do that, and feeling like I need my iPad as opposed to my iPhone. But I'm certainly open to that.
Do you see yourself jailbreaking the iPad when a jailbreak is released?
I don't know. Ultimately, it depends. I feel like I'd probably be more, depending on how AT&T implements the ability to turn the wireless plan on and off. The way they do with the iPhone, it's actually quite friendly. I mean, if you're going overseas and you buy an overseas data package, you can turn it on the day you leave, turn it off the day you get back, and if you've been gone for a quarter of a month, they prorate you and charge you 25% of what that monthly charge is, and you could literally do it on a daily basis if you needed to, through the web interface. If the iPad's data plans are similarly friendly, where you can turn it on and off almost on demand, then I don't know that I would feel the need to jailbreak my iPhone. But if you cannot do that, like if in turning on the plan you prepay $30 for the month, or you prepay $15 for whatever the data use allocation is, and that amount is what you pay whether you turn it off after a day or a month, then I probably would jailbreak my iPhone and download. I guess it's purchase the MyWi app, which turns the iPhone into a Wi-Fi hotspot. Although I've come to learn that drains the batteries like there's no tomorrow on the iPhone, so that's not a super great solution either.
Yeah, you almost need like a MiFi. You just plug in your SIM card into.
Exactly. Now, as far as the iPad itself, ultimately it depends on what I feel like I'm not getting that the jailbreak community can offer. I mean, on the iPhone, the two things to me that are most interesting, that just drive me nuts, that I can't do without jailbreaking, is having 5 apps in my dock.
Yeah.
And the SBS settings program, which gives you essentially on one screen a quick ability to turn stuff on and off without having to go 3-4 button taps deep in layered kind of menu structures, like turning Bluetooth on and off, and things like that. So on the iPad, I hate to sort of cop out and say it depends, but it depends. I mean, out of the box, look, if it were available on day one, no, I would live without it and sort of see how it went, and ultimately that's what I'm going to have to do anyway. So if the jailbreaking community comes up with something that's just really compelling that you can't do without jailbreaking, I have no hesitation in doing it, and no sort of techno fear or fear of bricking or voiding my warranty. For better or worse, I don't care about any of that stuff. I don't think it's a giant risk, but I ultimately don't care about it.
This podcast is supported by the iPad Possibilities podcast app, found in the iTunes App Store for $2.99. With the app, you'll gain early access to the shows and some extra bonus content not available in the regular podcast. Get it today for $2.99. So that was the first half of our discussion on the iPad as your sole computing device, getting rid of all those Kindles and laptops and switching over solely to the iPad. Next week, we'll delve more into the possibilities in the future of the iPad with the second half of our discussion, and really the future of computing. It's an exciting second half, and I'll have that for you next week. In the meantime, you can find Anthony Moody at iPadalone.com and Indalo Productions. And you can find this show on the web at iPadPossibilities.com, on Facebook. Just do a search for iPad Possibilities, and on iTunes. And I'd love if you guys could leave some reviews on iTunes. Let me know what you think. And feedback would also be appreciated at iPadPossibilities@gmail.com. And also, if you want to leave a voice message, just call in to 209-542-iPad. That's 209-542-4723. Just leave your thoughts and any topics you'd like to hear covered. And if it's appropriate, we'll have those included in the show in the future. And thanks again for listening. And this is the iPad Possibilities Podcast. We will speak again.